This week on Two Legs.
The incredibly talented Adrian Allan joins us yet again for part 2 of his great book.
Nice to meet you, and I look forward to showing you some examples of Paul McCartney's great songs from after the Beatles era and explaining how he's such a great musician and songwriter.
Cool. Stay tuned. Hi, McCartney fans, and welcome to another edition of Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. We are a Paul McCartney talk show mainly dealing with the solo career of Paul McCartney. I'm one of your two co-hosts, Tom Hunyadi, and you may know me from my other show, Talk More Talk, where myself and my three co-hosts talk all things solo Beatles. I am also joined by my co-host, my friend, my buddy, my backwards traveler. He is the one and only Andy Nichols. Andy, what's going on?
Didn't I just see you like yesterday?
I think so. I mean, this world of, podcasting, the great thing is we can do as many episodes as we want in a row and just release them whenever we're ready,
You're doing well, and always a pleasure to be on again. And thanks to Adrian for popping on for part 2. It seems like it was months ago now when I first came on the Two Legs team, and I think he was one of our first guests since I came on. So it's here we are all these months later now, and back at it again. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So as everybody can see, we're joined by Adrian Allan, who came in, like Andy said, a couple months ago to talk about this book right here, Paul McCartney After the Beatles, a musical appreciation. This was volume 1. And then now he's back to talk about this one, Paul McCartney After the Beatles, musical appreciation, volume 2. So Adrian, welcome back, and good to see you. How you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, no problem. Before we get into that, we're going to talk a little bit about the song "Angel in Disguise," which we haven't talked about yet, Andy.
No.
I know we've, we took a couple weeks off because of whatever reasons, and
work.
Yeah, work. Work, but so we haven't had the opportunity to talk about it. I believe early this month, late April, I don't remember now. We learned about the song going up for auction, which is "Angel in Disguise," which we learned was written for Ringo to be on his Time Takes Time album. We got a cassette that featured 2 versions of the song, the demo that Paul wrote for to send to Ringo, and then I believe it's Ringo's version as well, after he added a verse, I believe, and then some backing singers, more instrumentation. So it's pretty much Paul's demo and then Ringo's version. I would imagine that's the version that got left on the cutting room floor, if you will. Andy, you listened to this, right? I mean, it's just a 45-second one.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was towards the end of April when it came out. I remember we had texted at the time. To be blunt, I didn't like it. I didn't really care for it too much when we heard the little snippet of it. But again, any kind of documented recording of those two from that time obviously is going to get dissected by the
right.
But interesting, and Adrian, of course, did his own little take on it too, which was so cool. Who else in the world did that?
Yeah, but Adrian, I would imagine that you saw the same YouTube clip with the same minutes. But there was also, I don't know if you would call it a music sheet, but you had there's notes there that you were able to then perform the song, correct?
Well, what I can tell you about is we saw a very badly photocopied
Right.
version of what's called a lead sheet. Now, a lead sheet only gives you the chords and the basic outline of the melody. So you've got to really use your imagination to think how the rest of it goes. It doesn't tell you how fast the song goes, doesn't tell you what the style is, doesn't tell you what instruments are in it. It's a bit like you being given a recipe as a caterer.
Right.
It just tells you the ingredients and doesn't tell you any cooking instructions. So you've just got to use your own guesswork and intuition to work out the rest of it. Now, me, I thought it sounds like it might be a classic song in the style of something for Flaming Pie era. So I did it with like a slow intro, a bit like I did like a honey pie slow introduction, and then got it to build up and so on. And then when I heard the actual release one, I thought, oh my God, it's just like him doing a bad version of reggae stroke rap. And I got the style completely wrong. And then I have a few people saying that they preferred my version to his, actually. Even I can't sing, actually. So what I did is I did a terrible version of singing it, because I can picture, I've got a low voice, like a baritone. So somebody asked me, actually, can you work out how this tune goes? It was just really interesting. I just said I'll do it in about 10 minutes. So I did the best I could. Then I thought, well, let's make it into a proper thing. So I've got a friend of mine called Javier, who's from Argentina, who's met Paul McCartney. He'll do anything for laugh, because he's like an exhibitionist on the guitar. So I taught him how it goes, and he sang it. Then there's another lad who had another go, who's based in England, of doing it. And then when I actually listened to the final version, I realised I got the style wrong, but the melody was completely right. So I think I've got that right.
Because you, I mean, obviously you did this before we heard we saw the YouTube clip.
YouTube clip, yeah.
Yes, as I say, so all I had to work from really was what's called a lead sheet, which is a very, very rough version. Even the words weren't written under the notes properly. I wouldn't even call it a lead sheet. It's just like somebody doing a bit of a note form just for this, like say it was a musician who just wanted to remember how the tune went. It's the same musician, because I don't believe Paul McCartney wrote it, because he doesn't read or write music. So it's just one of the studio guys just jotted it down, and that's all I had. But I just used a bit of intuition and a bit of prior knowledge to work out how the tune probably went. But what I did get wrong was the style, and also he did it a lot faster as well, because there was nothing on it to say what the tempo was.
Gotcha. So what did you, I mean, what are your thoughts on the song? I mean, did you care for the song when you were deciphering it? And then what did you think of the song after you heard it, you know, on the YouTube version?
Well, it raises an interesting philosophical discussion about what is a song. Is a song the notes on a paper? Is a song the final recording? Because I thought, as the notes on the paper, it had some sort of potential. And if I had the best musicians in the world to make a version of it, I think we could come out with something reasonable. But all we heard was Paul McCartney's very rough demo, and it sounds like he's doing it with some like early 90s drum machine. And it just sounds... I know I've never really thought he's been that great at doing Caribbean or reggae style pieces. I've always thought like Sea Moon and things like that. I've always thought it sounds a bit like a white man trying to do something he's not, he can't really do, you know. I don't really think they'd be playing Sea Moon at a club in Jamaica or wouldn't they really? It's just like and I just thought let's face it, it's not one of his best songs ever if you hear the recorded version of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I would be interested to see when exactly the song came to be, whether he wrote it, you know, right around the time as Time Takes Time, or if he had this in his back pocket for several years like he usually does. You know, sometimes he'll whip out a song like A Beautiful Night where he had it in his back pocket for, you know, 15 years prior, you know, or so. But yeah, but we didn't get to hear the whole song. I'm interested to see if we are going to, because from my understanding, bootleggers or a bootlegger bought the song at an auction. You know, I guess probably.
What did it sell?
It's 8.8 thousand pounds, I believe. Right, roughly around there, or 8,000 pounds, and I think you know, in U.S. money it was like 9.9 thousand or something like that. So way below what they were hoping to get for that. I think they were expecting you know, like over 20,000 for the cassette.
Interesting.
I think the YouTube video probably spoils it and brought down the price a bit.
You know, and and I was going to bring up that point. It's like maybe they shouldn't have given that little snippet.
Because nobody had heard that. They would have said, "Hey, could this be like the most lost great recording, right?" And then people said,
Yeah, so maybe they should have just kept it to itself and not. Maybe it would have sold a little bit better, you know.
Yeah. Listen, it's history, right? So you know.
Right. Absolutely, and you know, I think it's cool whenever, you know, Paul and Ringo work together. I mean, I don't think everything that they've done together in the past was, you know, terrific, but you know, it's still nice to see them work together. But you know, I really don't want to, you know, give it too much judgment because I haven't heard the whole complete song. I mean, I don't know if it got any better than what it was, but
curious though. I mean, for time is good enough on its own that he chose not to
right.
song that Paul had written is an interesting choice. You know, would it have made the album any better? I mean, it's a pretty good album as on its own, I think.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Cool. All right. Well, hopefully we'll see a bootleg of that soon. I'm sure there was probably some probably getting a Time Takes Time bootleg ready right now somewhere out there, and we'll get that soon. But anyways, Adrian. So again, you know, thank you for coming back. Let's talk a little bit about this boy right here, Paul McCartney After the Beatles, a musical appreciation Volume 2. And man, I mean, it's obviously quite heavier than the first volume. You know, it looks like it's a lot thicker, more pages, whatnot. But were you happy with how Volume 1 performed, and would there have been a Volume 2 if Volume 1 didn't receive favorable reviews like it did?
I'm probably a little bit like Paul McCartney himself. Paul McCartney often says that if nobody brought his records, he still do it as a hobby. And to be honest with you, it's just I'll just sometimes sit down and have a bit of free time. That's what I'll do anyway. And Volume 1 really, it's made me a bit of pocket money to buy the kids some things, but it's not to turn my life around or anything like that. But I didn't do it for that reason. I do think there's probably a limited audience, first of all, for things after the Beatles. When I was selling a book at the Beatles convention and Liverpool last year, I noticed everybody was buying Beatles books, and then the solo career was less. And I also think when you start doing things a little bit more to do with music theory, it puts more people off again. But I was pleased. What counts more to me is the people who bought it were generally quite pleased about it, and the people even who didn't know that much about music theory spot that there were some things I'd learned from reading the book. I didn't want to make it an academic textbook. I wanted to be able to relate to people of different levels as well, and that's why I've put in other bits. And I'm very aware of that fact. That's why in Volume 2 I've put in bits about fan encounters, and I've put in concluding chapters.
We'll get to that.
Other filler stuff as well. So I was more pleased with the way it performed in reviews, and I knew it wasn't going to turn my life around. I'm still doing the same day job I was this time last year.
Right. Well, you made an interesting point about the solo careers being a harder sell than Beatles stuff, and I would agree with that. I mean, you notice whenever there's a Beatles product release, it gets a lot more attention than say the solo Beatles release. You know, every time these you know, reissues are coming out, these 50th anniversary sets that keep coming out. I mean, it's everywhere, you know, and I'm sure it's selling at a higher rate than, say, you know, probably some of the Paul McCartney archive sets, or even the John Lennon Imagine set that came out last year as well. But book-wise too, you know, other authors have said that, you know, it's a harder sell to talk about you know, one Beatle, you know, rather than, you know, all four.
How is that? I don't know why that's such a hard sell for publishers. I mean, we're talking about the Beatles, whether collectively or apart. They're still Beatles. Come on.
Right.
I just think the lack of imagination. I think they just think it's more of a risk element, because when somebody commissions a book, it's obviously a risk to think, is it going to be worth the cost of it? And it just there's more of a risk involved in a solo career book. Think, is it going to run a profit? But it should just have more imagination. I mean, you showed me your Paul McCartney book collection. It's got only about 10 books, isn't it? Whereas there's probably 2,000 or more books made of the Beatles.
Absolutely.
It's totally disproportionate, isn't it?
So
I think
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So before, so after Volume 1 came out, and before Volume, you started working on Volume 2, or before, you probably got the idea to do a Volume 2. One of the things I thought was really cool was that you were on Facebook a lot. Whether the Facebook Paul McCartney Facebook pages, and you took to that to prepare for Volume 2, getting other Macca fans interested in writing a second volume, and was that something that you just came up with on the spot to have other fans help you pick out songs for the next book, and other ideas?
Yeah, I mean, the fact is I don't know everything, and there's people who can help me. For example, on a song, I Am Your Singer, I'm basically trained as a classical guitar player. That's what I learnt my craft in, so I don't know that much about guitar effects. So I asked a lad there called Andrew Shakespeare about what guitar effect was used. He told me, they're using a tremolo amp on a song called I'm Your Singer. So it's, things like that. It's shared knowledge, really. And also I found it quite interesting because in the Eight Arms to Hold You book, one of the authors there, we don't know if it's Chip or Mark, said that Linda singing that song was terrible and out of tune, warbling and something. So I thought, let's ask a few more people what they think. So I did a little poll on that fanthology page and said, what do people think of Linda's singing? So in the book, I did a representative poll and just said, this is what most people think. And most people said it was like a reasonable amateur thing. And about 5% of people said it was terrible. So it's very useful to get other people's opinions, advice. I mean, I don't know everything. There's one guy who told me about a few songs I didn't know. I generally hadn't heard the song, the instrumental track Squid before.
Squid, right.
So because he's written so many songs since the Beatles, and some of them are just hidden on B-sides and stuff. So I hadn't heard that one before. So I listened to it and thought, that's an interesting one I'll talk about. So there were actually a few songs which I found out as well, just through sharing ideas. So you can never think you know everything, and there's always people who can give you some more ideas. So that's why I did that sharing on Facebook,
Right.
Hey, Adrian, was there always a part 2 always in the works, or was that based on after? Did you always plan to do 2 volumes, or no?
I pretty much think I was always planning to do 2 volumes because I think I hadn't said everything I wanted to say. I mean, I only did 80 songs in Volume 1, and I did 50 in Volume 2. And I'll come to why it's a lot bigger, even though there's 50 songs in. And I just thought, there's so much more I want to write about and talk about. I can't really stop. It's just something I wanted to do more about because I left out so many great songs as well.
Yeah.
So I always did have it. But what happens is when you write in a book and it gets much over 120,000 words long, which was what Volume 1 was, you start to get more expensive to sell. And when people are buying a book, if it's an unknown author in the Beatles world, but it's more of a risk to put something out for, say, $40 or $50 if it's a massive big book. But by Volume 2, I thought I've got enough readership and people know about me to make Volume 2 a bit longer. So I didn't want to make Volume 1 too long because it would get too expensive. And I don't think there's a risk of people don't want to buy something by an unknown author for Volume 1. So that's why I limited it.
Yeah. Well, and plus I think it was a great thing, like I said, getting on Facebook and getting your name out there, letting everybody know, yes, this is what I'm working on, give me your thoughts and input. I think that was a stroke of genius, really. And, I think people get more excited when you get other people involved. It's just the same for like a working environment. You get other people involved, there's more excitement there, and maybe there'll be more interest in actually purchasing the book as well. So good on you for doing that. I thought that was cool. Yeah. So some of the songs that you did pick, which is you look at them and you're like, how could these songs not be a first volume? Like like a Silly Love Song or Good Night Tonight. But in a way, it's kind of good because you bring people in for Volume 2. But you talk about songs like Squid. I think you also said like Why So Blue was another song that you weren't familiar with at the time.
Yeah, I must admit I've not heard that song before. When I heard it, I thought this is such a great song because I'm of the opinion that I don't think the last 10, 15 years have been the best for McCartney. And I was surprised to find a really good song which was left off the Memory Almost Full album. and it's ended up as a B-side or something. And I thought
Right.
that sounds like something that could have been on one of his greatest hits albums. You know.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I was really surprised at how good that was. And I think when I shared it on the Fanthology page, which seemed to attract the most attention, that page, a lot of people there hadn't really heard of it as well.
Right.
So I mean, you were obviously familiar with that song, but a lot of people really don't know that song. You know.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's a great song. I'm glad you included it. Also, you know, you include like Squid stuff that, you know, I mean, obviously Squid did get I think an official release from the Ubu Jubu. That was a B-side on one of the Flaming Pie
again, like
singles.
Like we were talking last night, it's bundled in the episode. It's not
right. But then you also include a song that never got an official release for Paul wise. I mean, it was on later on a 10cc album, but Yvonne, which is I think one of his best songs ever, and that which hasn't seen a McCartney release, and I thought that was really cool that you added that one as well.
I think that's a really good song as well. And I also want to say one more one that didn't get an official release. I'm pretty sure it didn't. Was Did We Meet Somewhere Before?
Right.
Which I think is one of my favourite ever McCartney tracks. Right. And it's unusual because there's a solo clarinet throughout the whole track. I mean, how many more pop songs can you name with a solo clarinet throughout nearly the whole track? And actually, what's interesting is how good knowledge is on the internet. I actually didn't know it was an alto saxophone that was playing that solo. So I asked I'm on a number of orchestration and classical pages. So I started asking people, is this an alto sax or is it soprano sax? So I thought it was soprano sax at first. And everybody on that page said, oh, I think it's a soprano sax. But then afterwards, I read that in the story of the film, which was written for, the main protagonist in the film is a clarinet player. So I thought, well, it's got to be a clarinet then, hasn't it? Because it's got the same basic range as a soprano sax. So that told me it was a clarinet. But that just shows how good it is on social media to be able to ask questions about things you're not sure about. And right to this day, I've got some classical music people who really know more than I do, and a few people who know about jazz a bit more. So if there's something I'm stuck on, I will ask them some questions. There was that thing I did on the website the other day about the theme from The Family Way, for example. We had a massive debate on whether the main theme was played by a flugelhorn or a cornet. And right to this day, I'm not sure if it's flugelhorn or cornet. There's some people who say it's definitely flugelhorn. Some people say it's definitely cornet. They've got exactly the same note range. Just one sounds a bit different from the other because one's got a different shaped bore, the hole that runs through the instrument. So it's great to be able to get expert knowledge just at the click of a few buttons on Facebook.
Right. Yeah, because I don't know if there's actually any information about who played what on that track or that whole album. So I guess you would have to have been in the studio.
It just says the George Martin Orchestra. That's all it actually says. So we don't know who played what on it at all.
Gotcha.
I don't even know. I mean, it interests me, and I know it's diverging a bit from the book, but the theme from The Family Way is really for classical guitar as well. We don't know who played the guitar in it, which is, you'd think we'd know who played this extensive guitar part through, but we really don't know who played it.
Right. Interesting. Again, like the first book, you get into a lot of, chords and stuff like that. I mean, this book is, for, not only just for beginning McCartney fans, but also, musicians as well to learn the music of McCartney. Talk about some of these chords. I mean, like a diminished chord and augmented chords, and, how do they, play into McCartney's music?
Diminished sevenths too. Very cute.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to think, there's one of the first ever uses of an augmented chord that Paul McCartney heard was actually "Raining in My Heart" by Buddy Holly. It actually starts off with an augmented chord. Let me just see if I can remember that again. Yeah, it goes. I can't sing, but like the sun is out, the sky is blue. So this chord, the second chord, that's D, but it goes to D augmented. So it's got that unusual sound. It's basically, we talk about tension and resolution loss in music. This chord sounds unstable. It wants to go somewhere. It either wants to go up to B minor or wants to go back to D major. On itself, you can tell that B flat sounds a little bit out of place in it. And it's a very common technique that the Beatles use for a lot of songs. and in the post-Beatles career spell, the John Lennon song "Just Like Starting Over" makes prominent use of augmented chords, and basically the main progression in the chorus of "Just Like Starting Over" is based upon that same progression which is used in "Raining in My Heart" by Buddy Holly. And also, and we're talking about diminished chords. The beginning of "Till There Was You," which is obviously a cover version of Beatles used, starts the second chord of that as a diminished chord. So right on from the early career, they were using these unusual chords, or not really unusual. We call them chromatic chords, the chords which have got added notes which are taken from outside the scale, which jazz people know all about. Jazz people are experts in these chords. Classical people know about it as well. But if you've got other bands like, say, the Rolling Stones or things like that, they don't really use that more sophisticated harmony, but tend to more gravitate towards the basic 3 or 4 chords, which are used in blues and basic blues, not jazz blues. So,
Gotcha.
Oh, kind of jumping on what Tom was talking about too, in the theory section of the book, somebody again who's not formally trained musician, the section that you talked about, the circle of fifths, especially the diagram. So that I think was so helpful because it gives a nice visual way to explain what you're talking about for somebody who might not be a trained musician to look at that and see that broken down. Can you kind of talk a little bit about the circle of fifths and some of the examples you were talking about, specifically I think Dudley in Red Rose Speedway, I think you mentioned?
Yeah, we've got the song "Hold Me Tight," which is the jazz people basically use a circle of fifths a lot. It's basically going down a fifth each time to change chords, and it makes a whole circle. If you keep going around a circle, if I just talk about in sort of layman's terms, if we start off with the key signature as C, so you're playing in the chord of C here, and then you go to C7, then you go to F, then you go to F7, and then you go to B flat. And each time you're going down a fifth and going down a fifth. And if you keep going around this circle, you're adding a flat each time. So you're going around this circle of key signatures. You end up right back at the start at C major again. Now the circle of fifths was first most obviously used in the Beatles song "You Never Give Me Your Money," which is a prominent use of circle of fifth effect. So it starts off with A like and it goes to G, then it from C goes F. So it goes around a circle of fifths. So we do see the Beatles experimenting with the circles of fifths. Now, "You Never Give Me Your Money" was basically Paul McCartney composition on Abbey Road. And then you can use circle of fifths. You don't have to go around the whole circle. You can just use snatches of the circle of fifths. And there's something that you get at the end of verses normally called a 2-5-1 progression, which is like a little bit of the circle of fifths. So it just basically, the ear latches on to certain chord progressions and things like that. And Paul McCartney has used these snatches of these chord progressions in his career. But the most obvious examples of the big complete sections of circle of fifths, the biggest one is "Hold Me Tight" from Red Rose Speedway. And the solo Beatles, the Beatles career one is "You Never Give Me Your Money," which is basically a whole song based on a circle of fifths. I mean, I'm a bit of a geek now. I do look for this in other pop music songs as well. "I Will Survive." Now, "I Will Survive" is by Gloria Gaynor, isn't it? Right. That whole song is again based on a circle of fifths. So you do see these, So you do see these things popping up in and also, I've noted you see trends in pop music as well. In a certain era, if you're using a certain chord progression, you'll see another song from the same era using a similar chord progression. It's because people borrow from each other and borrow the same ideas. So I think I said on the website the other week, when Red Rose Speedway was out, he used this particular chord progression. It was used in quite a few sentimental songs at the time in the early 70s, used this particular chord progression. So it's that borrowing between different musicians. It's so interesting to learn about.
Study into actually what was popular at the time, trendy-wise too, because what other people were doing very similar things musically in a given era.
Well, yeah, and jumping to that, and that's something that you included in this book, musical trends. You talked about, each decade, what was popular at that time. What made you want to, add something like that to the book?
I just thought that in the first book, what I did is in each chapter and each decade, I just said what were Wings doing and what was Paul McCartney doing that
Right,
decade.
exactly.
I wanted to
Right.
get a bigger picture of. We all know that the Beatles were basically central to the 1960s music, fashion, culture,
Right.
and everything. And I wanted to basically answer the whole big question of what was Paul McCartney's role after 1970 in shaping the wider music culture or wider popular culture. Was he somebody who influenced trends? Was he somebody who copied trends, or was he
Mhm.
somebody who sat on the sidelines and basically did his own thing? Now, in the conclusion part of the whole book, I do start to draw some conclusions about Paul McCartney's role after 1970s and the whole bigger picture of popular culture.
Mhm.
But I just thought it's such a fascinating thing that was Paul McCartney from the 70s onwards looking at things from these sidelines and just copying, or was he still influencing trends? And I'd say, really, if you think about the most prominent musical style of the 1970s, probably being disco, really, Paul McCartney paid lip service to it in a few songs, but there's no way you could say that Paul McCartney was the melting pot for the whole 1970s disco explosion. And there's no
Mhm.
way you could argue that the album McCartney 2 was responsible for the whole growth of 1980s electronica.
Right.
Although McCartney's 2 album was a bit of him dabbling around with electronic sounds. You can't say it was an
Right.
influential album in the same way that New Order were, or Ultravox, or some of the other electronic
Right.
groups which we think about in the 80s.
What about like the singer songwriter aspect of the early '70s? Would you say he was, like in the forefront of that genre? Starting with the
Definitely.
McCartney album.
I definitely think he still inspired singer-songwriters like Billy Joel and the great singer-songwriters who we think about of that era, like Elton John as well. He was on the same sort of level as those people. Where you can't say
Right.
that Billy Joel and Elton John were really influencing trends in disco. They might
Right.
have done one disco influence or 2 disco influence tracks, but they were still doing their own thing and promoting the whole
Hmm.
craft of songwriting. That's basically how I see Paul McCartney's role from the 70s really is still promoting
Okay.
the craft of songwriting more than anything else.
Right. So, another part of the book I found kind of interesting is, so first question then, how do you feel about the bass as an instrument?
The bass guitar,
Yeah, bass guitar.
I
Yeah.
think it's an amazing instrument, because
Yeah.
it's got the amazing potential. Because I was actually watching some old videos from the 1950s last night, because where I was working after the residents have gone to bed to do some care homework as well. You're allowed to sit and watch the CD with the sound turned down. And you notice in the late 50s it was the upright bass which predominated with
Hmm.
Elvis Presley, and then at some point in the early 1960s, something like that, the bass guitar just exploded onto the scene, and the upright bass was basically
Right.
dead in the water. But
Water. Yeah.
it's not just an idea of amplifying the bass frequency on a song. It helps to lead the direction of the chords as well,
Okay.
and it adds logic to the chord progressions which Paul McCartney used in his career, and it's
Right.
all got these interesting solo parts. So I think he's an amazing bass player, and the bass guitar is one of the central aspects of his songwriting and the whole
Right.
production of his songs.
Yeah, because then I just found that, after that, then I just found it interesting that, you're right, there's no obligation to always offer a bass part
Mm.
in music. I
Yeah.
just found that interesting where you just
Mm.
feel like, you know, two acoustic guitars can, do the same thing,
Mm.
as a bass. So you write down like you give like an example of the White Stripes as someone that
Mm.
don't use bass and seem to
Mm.
be very successful,
Yeah.
without it.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible to have some great things without the bass guitar.
Right.
Like I think the Everly Brothers didn't really use bass
Right.
guitar that much.
Hmm.
But I mean, it's just one element which adds so much to the mix. I mean, there are
Right.
some songs which Paul McCartney has done without bass guitar, particularly some of his more solo acoustic guitar works, things like
Right.
that.
Right.
But if you imagine a rock band playing a rock song, which is part of Paul McCartney's thing of pop rock group, and taking the bass guitar out, there would be a lot missing there. So in its right context, you kind of have works without bass guitar, but I think once you put a bass guitar in, it brings so much to the mix. But you are right, the White Stripes did have their own particular style, which was based on no guitar, and also slightly wonky drumming styles as well, which people would like. But you know, it's a bit quirky, but you know, you can have. But I think the bass guitar is such an important instrument in his career that deserved to write about some of his styles and some of the techniques he used.
Gotcha.
You know.
Gotcha. I believe in the book you also, you know, talking about you were only able to, well, I don't know if you were able to, you just, in fact, you know, only put like 3 words if you're describing a lyric. I mean, was there something in like copyrights that you were able to put a certain amount of lyric in the book?
Basically, it's based on fair use, really. I mean, I just wanted to err on the side of caution. Once you start, I mean, you are allowed by copyright law to describe music, because if you can't describe music, you can't do a music review, and you are allowed to say the song's title as well. But once you start actually writing words out, you start writing out bits of sheet music, then you are slightly more dodgy ground. But so that's the reason I didn't do that, and I didn't really think it was that necessary. I mean, I do mention the words a bit, but the main emphasis is on the music, probably because I'm more influenced by the music myself rather than the words. But I mean, if in the future somebody wants to do something analysing Paul McCartney's lyrical input, it would be wise to seek permission. Let's put it that way, because when you're quoting a lot of words, you can use something called fair use. But I just thought, if I'm going to use the odd words, nobody's going to object to me saying 2 or 3 words. So yeah,
right. And then, you know, pictures were blurred a little bit as well. I mean, is that another thing that you had to do as well?
No, that was accidental. I mean, some of the pictures, they are original. They're given to me by fans, but I didn't use a single copyright picture. All the pictures there. There's some which are a bit impressionistic, and some people at the gigs in the 1970s didn't have the best cameras available. I mean, the one on the front cover is great. That's by James Liverani, who you know as some of you met Paul McCartney, and is quite active on the Beatles pages. So I wanted a really good font for the front cover. I just thought, so some people, I basically asked fans who can lend me who can give me a photograph for the book.
Right.
And if they did that, then we got a free book. So with some of the photographs aren't the best, but they give an impression of what the era was.
There's a nice photo with the Alan Robb. That was a nice photo.
Yes, you've actually met Paul McCartney before a concert in about 1974. So there are some very good, clear pictures. But really, I wanted to give a bit of a fans account as well, because this book hasn't been done through a publishing house or anything. So it means I've been able to reach out to fans and ask for something quite unique, which is their fan photographs. And they're not always going to be the best, but they do give a unique perspective on them meeting or seeing Paul McCartney or taking a photo. You know?
Right. Yeah, I mean, even getting a photo of the Pretty Little Head cassette single, I thought that was that was pretty funny. But
well, it is a unique thing, and that cassette single was released because it was I remember at the time I was reading the Beatles book monthly. It was slipping down the charts, and just in one desperate attempt to push it back at the chart, they released it on this additional format as well, which a lot of people won't even know what a cast single or cassette single is. They just thought I'd shared that because some people reading it might never have seen one before, because it's basically cassettes are obsolete now, aren't they? You know? I teach young people, because I teach in the day, and I'll talk to young people and I haven't got a clue. And you'll see that common Facebook meme, and you'll say only people above the age of 40 will know the connection between a pencil and a cassette. You know, all the time.
That's right.
Pulled out,
Well, it's not dead quite yet. You know, listen, there's a little bit of a cassette revival now. Egypt Station's out on cassette. You know.
Right. Well, you know, it's funny because, you know, right around that time, you know, he was really starting to get big into different configurations of you know, whether it's a single, whether it was, you know, 7-inch or a 12-inch or the picture disc. You know, I know he did the picture disc for like Spies Like Us and for We All Stand Together. You know, and then the cassettes, and then, you know, so yeah, I mean, just different ways to try to, for the collector too, to, you know, to get everything, and then for different ways for people to, you know, like you said, possibly, you know, get that song back up in the charts, you know, but well, to each their own, I guess, you know.
Have you got all the different versions of Press? Because I think Press was the one that was releasing all the different versions. They actually brought out the album of it, then decided at the last minute, but they didn't like the mix of it, so they actually remixed as two versions of the vinyl album as well, because they've changed the mix on it after about
so
10,000 copies, you know.
So I do have the 7-inch, and I do have the 12-inch version of that single. You know, I'm fine with the song either way. I mean, I don't think there's really a bad mix of it out there. I mean, because I'm just a big fan of that song in general. Anyway,
you start to lose the plot a little bit when you got to track down all the different mixes of way.
But you know, other stuff in the book. You know, we mentioned, like, you know, the innovator and follower from, you know, chapter to chapter, or decade to decade, actually. And you know, did you feel like this guy continued, like, his innovation style, or him being an innovator weakened as the decades went on?
My opinion of it is that he tried to be an innovator up until the time of Press to Play, which we were just talking about, but because of the lack of success of Press to Play, I think he decided to play it very conservatively on the next album, Flowers in the Dirt. And from that point on, he made the decision that he was going to do anything experimental. Rather than alienate his fans, he would do it on the Fireman label and do all his experimental stuff on a different album. And I think he has played it safe in terms of traditional songwriting, which is a shame in a way. But I really think from the 70s onwards, he's stuck at what he's done best, which is the craft of songwriting. You can't say for a second that Paul McCartney had anything to do with the Acid House revival of the late 80s, 90s. He wasn't standing there singing "Easy Good, Ebenezer Good." No, he wasn't anything to do with that. He was a middle-aged man with 3 teenage kids. He did his own thing. And so that's the way I see him fitting in. And people who follow the craft of songwriting see him in that viewpoint. And obviously he's done bits of classical in that period as well. So I think he did turn his back a bit on contemporary trends. He just made a comment like, he listened to the Happy Mondays, and he said the Happy Mondays reminded him a bit of the psychedelic era of the Beatles. But at no point did he start trying to take acid and compete on his own terms with the Happy Mondays, or do his own song about ecstasy or anything like that. You know, that he was a different part of his phase in his life then, you know.
One of my favorite parts of the book, Adrian, was I guess in the beginning, when you kind of you contextualize Paul McCartney in the 70s amongst all the other people of his contemporaries of the time. It was a wonderful segment of the book, kind of explaining where Paul McCartney was at as a solo artist amongst all his contemporaries of the time, as you mentioned, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath. I enjoyed that section of the book quite a lot.
Right. Yeah, I mean, somebody once made a rather cruel remark that Wings are a bit like rock and roll with its teeth taken out and put on a bedside table. I don't know, one critic said that because basically, when Paul McCartney tries to do rock, he'll always do rock with family-orientated values, and also his tradition, also his instinctive sense of melody and harmony. So it's always going to be rock music filtered through. He just can't resist being a melodist, you know what I mean? So he'll do rock in his own way, but it's like he'll make an effort to do the hard. Once he'd done that song on the White Album, what's it for, House of Scales? Once he'd done that was his experiment about doing the hardest, rockiest thing he could have done. And then he did Spin It On, was like a bit of a tribute to punk as well. I don't really see him as being a hard rocker. I think he's more of a middle off a road pop stroke rock, and the people who listen to him and listen to the rich harmonies, the rich melodies, the instrumentation, all the things which you can add to rock music just to give it a slightly richer dimension. You know, that's the way I see him in the 70s. I don't see him competing on the same terms as Led Zeppelin at all. I don't think Wings were ever designed to be anything like Led Zeppelin, you know.
No.
Yeah. Are you impressed with the amount of different genres that he's been giving us throughout the years? I mean, just the different music styling. I mean, at you as a musician, I mean, I would imagine, you know, hearing him do different genres of music, whether it's, you know, reggae or rock or country or even like a little disco
Yeah.
feel, you know.
Stuff.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, it's pretty impressive, you know, don't you think?
He's tried nearly everything, I'd say.
Right.
The one thing he hadn't really done much in the Beatles was like a Latin style, which he did on things like Good Night Tonight. I don't think there's any Beatles song which is much influenced by Latin, Brazilian or bossa nova. So he's even done a little bit with that. I mean, some of his songs, when he does go into different styles, it almost feels a bit like an insider having a go at it. I don't think the song Back in Brazil from the Egypt Station album, I'm not going to say that's going to compete on its own terms with some of the greatest Latin songs ever written. You know, so it's sometimes you'll see he's incorporating elements of those styles and giving it lending a certain flavour to his music. I think the great mark of if somebody who's mastered a style is, are the people going to be listening? Who are the people who are real fans of that style, listening to that style on its own terms? Are the people in Jamaica really going to be listening to Sea Moon after Bob Marley? And they're going to say, "Oh, come on, guys, let's throw on Sea Moon next. That's a great reggae track." Or is it like is Sea Moon a bit like a watered down Westerners take? On reggae,
or something like the millennials going to listen to a song like "For You," you know? Is that gonna, you know?
It's I'm not a fan of that really. I've got to say, just I found it a bit embarrassing. But yeah, I mean, but I'd say something like Mull of Kintyre. You do find pipe bands throughout Scotland have adopted that track. Maybe that's just to win over the audience that people know it. But to me, when I listen to Mull of Kintyre, it does sound like it could be an authentic Scottish folk song. So I think when you're competing against that style and actually winning over the adherents of that style, then you know you've done something really special when you're competing on the same ground, you know.
Right. You know, getting into you know, in the second half of the book, we're going to talk about 3 songs. Adrian's going to break down 3 songs again, like he did on the first episode, but on the first time he was on. But you know, getting onto the second later half of the book, you talk about you know, close encounters that fans have had, you know, with McCartney. What brought you to you know, write something like that and add it to the book?
Because the book really wasn't. It was my book because I wrote it, but it was a lot of it was due to the contribution and hard work of other fans lending photographs or discussing things on the internet. And I also thought, because in the last book I did a very short section where I pulled together some quotations from YouTube describing how Paul McCartney's songs had affected or influenced people. And I just thought it'd be nice to have a bit of a fan input. And I also thought, because if I was writing a book for myself, even though I do like reading about music theory, if it's just all complete music theory, I'd like to be able to flick to a different part of a book and rest my eyes and just read about something a bit more light-hearted. So there's quite a few fan encounters in there which are just a bit more light-hearted and easy to read, just describing how people met Paul McCartney and how he responded. And also had a chapter at the end describing Paul McCartney's influence, not just as a songwriter, musician, but as a person, his whole cultural influence. And I thought how this man behaves as a person is partly based upon how he reacts to fans and how he deals with members of the public. And I thought a whole package of Paul McCartney is about how he responds to members of the public and his fans. And to me, that's the whole part of the whole thing. And it was quite nice to read these anecdotes from people who've met him. And he does seem to be a warm and generous person. And I do think you feel that warmth and generosity coming over in his music as well. So it confirms some of the themes.
Adrian, have you had any close encounters to get to meet him, or no?
No, I've not met Paul McCartney. I've not been lucky enough to meet Paul McCartney yet. But if I was going to meet Paul McCartney, I'd rather spend some time talking to him rather than just pestering for an autograph or something like that. I don't feel any great desire to meet the man, because I think I know a lot about him from his music already. But nowadays, it's very hard to meet Paul McCartney because he's so inaccessible, isn't he? I mean, I've played classical guitar and I've met nearly all the world's great classical guitar players because you can just go and meet them afterwards in the concert. But the bigger star you are, there's no way you're going to meet some of these people.
No, but I'm sure it would be refreshing for him if he actually ever had the chance to meet you, because you could talk to him and you have such a great understanding of his songwriting and how he composes. He'd be like, oh wow, this person knows what they're talking about. I'm not just dealing with a super fan. You know?
I mean, I'd really like to think he's seen the book and read it, but I really don't know. I mean, I sent him a book I sent him the first book to MPL, but I mean, it could have gone anywhere. Who knows? I know that Peter Doggett has written a few books. I remember him saying at a Beatles convention years ago, he sends Beatles magazines and Beatles books to the Beatles, and none of them respond ever. You know, to me, it just doesn't seem to be their thing to do it. So, but I imagine somebody there at MPL will check his mail and say if there's anything that they think is important, then they will put to one side. Because I know that when Len Garry out of the Quarrymen wrote to Paul McCartney and said, "Do you remember me?" and all the rest of it, he actually got a phone call from Paul McCartney about a week later, and his daughter picked up the phone, and his daughter said, "Oh, Dad, it's Paul McCartney on the phone for you." You know, so there must be someone at MPL who does look through stuff and sees if it's important. You know.
Well, listen, I'm sure MPL gets loads of mail, I'm sure, but they're not getting any kind of a book that has any kind of analysis of his solo works like yours. So
no, probably not every week. No.
No. So hopefully somebody in there sees that thing and says, "Hey, give that guy a call and put him on retainer."
Hopefully.
Yeah, right. Yeah. One of the interesting ones, Close Encounters, is Dan Ely, who's got an amazing story. You know, I mean, he was there pretty much throughout the whole time the Wings were in Nashville, you know, talking about getting to hear, you know, the Genius Farm from scratch. You know, that had to have been really exciting. And you know, happy to say that, you know, I've been in touch with Dan and he'll be on the show soon, so we'll get to hear that whole story. So, you know, pretty good idea doing this.
And even losing his bass guitar, and I did a story about him losing and finding. That's a fascinating story in himself. How he sold his bass guitar Paul McCartney used once. Paul McCartney kept for a week while he was at the farm, and he spent about 15 or 20 years trying to trace it back to all these different leads, and managed to eventually get this bass guitar back. It's Rickenbacker that Paul McCartney once played. You know.
Right. And then one of the other, highlights of the book then is you know, getting to interview somebody that really hasn't talked much about his time in Wings, and that's the drummer Jeff Britton. Let's talk about that for a minute. I mean, that had to have been pretty exciting to interview someone that works so closely with McCartney.
Well, it was Dan Ely who put me in touch with Jeff Britton, and it took Dan Ely a long time to contact Jeff Britton as well. He's living in Alicante in Spain now. And the great thing about Jeff Britton is that his mind is totally sharp, because he was, and I think one of the reasons that he'll freely admit that he didn't get on with a band maybe was because they were partying and he was into the self-discipline of karate. And when you believe in this whole ethos of karate, you don't put anything into your body, because your body's a temple and you've got to look after it, respect it. And he used the karate to develop he said he used it to improve his right hand skills as well. So he had this totally different philosophy and mindset. And you think about somebody like Jimmy McCulloch. I mean, I'm not sure about Jimmy McCulloch. He was a young man, and I believe he's into hard partying. I mean, no wonder he didn't. There was going to be some tensions there, you know. But I avoided that completely. All I asked Jeff Britton about was totally about his time in Wings, and I managed to clear some things up. Some things which I've always been interested in. For example, were there any overdubs on one hand clapping? I mean, he tells me there's no overdubs at all on one hand clapping. What you see is what you get. I was able to ask him about songs like Proud Mum. You know, it was a really obscure McCartney instrumental, which actually done for a bread advert, would you believe, in the 1970s. And, you know, all these things I was able to ask him about. Did he ever go to Paul McCartney's farm and rehearse with him there? When, you know, how did he come to write Sally G? Did Wings ever play to a click track? I mean, some people have claimed, some 70s band played to click track. No, Wings never played to click track. It was again, it was just all basically him doing the drumming, and so it's just musical things which just fascinated me. I wanted to ask him about, you know.
Right. Well, the one thing too that you ask him, which is great, which you know, because you know Paul has this tradition of knowing exactly what he wants in a song. I mean, one of the things you asked him about is, did he give you the freedom to play drums, which I think is an important question, because we know he has this history of coming in, you know, and you play this, play that, and then we're Wings a real band in the sense that, you know, everybody contributed, you know, to the song rather than just being told what to play. So,
yeah, and he was allowed to play pretty much. And I mean, there were songs where he was given instructions, but I mean, I think those drum parts on I think Soily is one of the best examples of his drums playing, because you hear all these different drum fills. And well, that's one song I was interested to ask, why the hell was that song never made into a proper studio recording?
Right.
He didn't know it was never made into a studio recording. He thought when he was playing it at one hand clapping, it was already, maybe it's gotten over the years, he thought being on a B-side or something. I had to tell him, the only real studio recording you've got of that is the live version, which is from one hand clapping. So that's not even a proper studio version. There's no overdubbing, you know.
Yeah, it's a good track though. I liked his performance on that, and I liked the Wings Over America version as well too. It's a great record.
Interesting way. He wasn't there that long, but he played on a lot of key material for a short amount of time, you know, and even a little bit of the beginning of Venus and Mars, you know. So he wasn't there for a very long time, but you know,
enough to make his mark.
Yeah, enough to make his mark, and his contributions were certainly significant enough, you know, before Joe English came in.
Right.
And you heard about the Letting Go story as well, how he wanted it to be like an Al Green track. And by the time that they'd recorded it finally, it was like a rock song, and he was totally disappointed. And I think he told me that he only played his vinyl copy of the album once, and then he sold it recently because he just didn't like the recording of Letting Go on it at all. He just thought it lost the whole spirit of the original.
Right.
So it's just interesting how that track actually evolved.
Yeah, looking at it right now. And so funny stuff. Good, great job with the questions. You know, how long did you have to prepare for that?
I only had a couple of days, because Dan said, "Oh, give me a ring." I'm just so keen to ring him that I just said, "Can I ring him?" I mean, for a long time, I've known what sort of questions I'd ask him anyway. But then, about probably about 2 months ago, before this whole coronavirus thing started, I thought, "Oh, I wish I'd have asked him these questions." So I tried contacting him again and said, "There's just a few more questions." And then he didn't respond for about 4 weeks, and I published a book, and then he responded. So what I had to do is I actually had to withdraw the book from, and then interview him again, ask him a few more questions, and I put his extra questions in the book. So I had to do the book again. I wanted to know about his thing about tuning the drums, because it's always fascinated me. You think about tuning the guitar. Drummers spend a lot of time tuning the drums. So I wanted to know about how he tuned his drums. I mean, it sounds a bit of a geeky question, but I just was really interested in to know that, you know.
Right. Yeah, one of the great things out there that with Jeff Britton with his time is with Wings is the Top of the Pops performance of Junior's Farm. Yeah. You know, it's really good, cool stuff. You know, but yeah, good stuff. I mean, did you try to reach out to any other ex-Wings or musicians that worked with Paul throughout the years?
No, not this time. I mean, the main thing is I didn't want the book to be too imbalanced. You could do the whole book with loads of interviews in.
Right.
I mean, if I was going to do another book, I might try and reach out. I have tried to reach out to other ones before without much success. I just think it helps if you know an in-between person, because I knew Dan Ely, and Dan Ely trusted me and things like that. And in the actual conclusion part of the book, I wanted to know about some musicians whose careers had been influenced by Paul McCartney after 1970.
Right.
So I asked a couple of musicians who were reasonably prominent. There's a band in the 80s in Britain, in Liverpool, called the Icicle Works, who who were quite big in Britain at the time. So, and the lead singer and that is still active. So I asked him, and there's another guy who's quite a prominent session musician who's just been working with Denny Simon recently, called Fernando Perdomo, who I reached out to, and I asked him about Paul McCartney's influence as well. So yeah, I just asked those three people, but the last two were just small sections in the conclusion.
Right. Yeah, it seems like more now that people talk about how they're more influenced by Paul these days. You know, especially younger musicians. It's like you know, Billie Eilish or Irish or whatever her name is. You know, and others, they talk highly of him, but they don't really, you know, talk about, you know, him as an innovator, but more or less, you know, somebody that inspired him, whether it's a musical sense or you know, a songwriting sense, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with that is I wanted some people who could tell me how his post-Beatles career, because every single thing, or 90%, is how did Paul McCartney inspire you? Somebody's going to say "Hey Jude" or "Let It Be" or something, and I'm sick of hearing it. To be honest with you, I heard so much Beatles stuff now. I don't want to. I've heard enough about the Beatles. I don't want to know anymore. I think I want to know about Paul McCartney. So I had to make sure. I want to ask a few people who can tell me how his Paul McCartney's career after 1970 influenced him, so I could put it into a conclusion. So I wanted a couple of people who could actually tell me about that part of his career. Because if you ask 90% of people, they're just going to quote the Beatles back at you, aren't they? You know.
Yeah, I think there are probably some musicians out there that are in the know, that do know, that are influenced by Paul as a solo artist himself, but they're probably very few and far between. It's all just a Beatle thing for most people. Well, there are a couple bands out there that I generally, they do know. You know, you can just tell. I mean, I know like Dave Grohl, the Foo Fighters, people like that. I mean, they're not modern, but they, you know, certain bands, you know, where he was, you know, obviously his contributions as an artist in the 70s were good, not just a Beatle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's you know, we kind of picked a couple songs for Adrian to break down like he did first time he was with us. You know, Andy, what song did you pick, and why did you pick that song?
I picked this one only because I was listening to it the other day, and it's so different. And that song is Pretty Little Head, which is a song unlike anything else in the man's, you know, catalog. It's just so different. And I'm curious to hear Adrian talk a little bit about it and its structure and its breakdown.
Well, I've got a guitar ready, so I'll run through a little bit about it for you. Right, now, Pretty Little Head. It's in a minor key. It's in the key of C minor. So it's in that key, but that doesn't work well on the guitar, so I'm going to do it in A minor. Now, the Pretty Little Head is actually based upon a minor pentatonic scale, the main riff. So now, when we think of minor pentatonic scale for musicians, we often talk about black blues. We talk about bluesy sounding sixth note, and you'll do that, and somebody going. It'll be doing all the minor pentatonic riffs and everything, but Pretty Little Head sounds nothing like that at all. It's in the minor pentatonic scale, but you go. It's got this riff going on all the way through it, so it starts the song off, and it's a very tight riff. It sounds not at all bluesy. It's in the minor pentatonic scale. And before it even starts, actually, you've got all these amazing panning effects. So it helps if you listen with headphones, you know, when you hear the panning between the different speakers. And I believe on it, the basic track, you've got Paul on drums, Eric Stewart on keyboards, and Jerry Marotta is playing the vibes. And the vibes are doing that sort of riff for it. And then you've got Paul McCartney. If you're going to listen to Pretty Little Head, don't think of it as being a classic McCartney song with verse, chorus, and middle eight. It's not a long winding road. It's more based upon a minimalistic style of repetition. But it's within that repetition, it's how many different layers you can put on the top of it and how interesting you can make it. And I really recommend people listen to the single version, not the album version, because the album version is rubbish compared to the single version.
Agreed.
The single version's got an amazing bass guitar part, and it's got all these slappy bits. You can hear these slappy effects. You'll hear him do on a slap bass, and it's just quite unusual for him to do that. But the basic guitar thing is very basic. It just starts off with that, with a basic riff, and then it goes, and then the bass line it basically goes like that with a different bass line. But then, as the song progresses, you've got the Hillman thing coming in. Now the Hillman bit, let me just remember how that goes now. Yeah. So the Hillman is just repeating notes. Hillman. It just repeats the notes, but then he's got you know that. He actually does that bit in a harmony. He does that in, he harmonizes that in first. Go, you know, he goes, You've got another part where he's singing, so he just can't help adding bits of harmony to his own composition. So that's another bit it's interesting to listen to. But over the top of these riffs as it develops, you've got all these other little bits. Like what else you got? Remember that little riff that goes in it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's adding all these different textures that go in and all these other extra instrumental parts that you don't really notice. But the basic track is just all the way basically based on that with just a descending bass line. So it's quite simple. But what interests me really is a combination of minimalism. And minimalism is actually a term with classical music as well, where you just basically use the same repeated patterns throughout a track. I don't know if you know much about. There's somebody called Steve Reich and Terry Riley, that you know, these classical composers, but they base their careers on minimalism, and also Philip Glass as well to some extent. But it's a combination of minimalism. There's electronica as well, so he's combining that element as well. And he's also combining it almost with a primitivism as well, because he's got this primitivist theme of these hillmen coming down from the mountain as well, and that's suggested by the lyrics. So he's got this almost elements of tribal intensity as well. So there's all this fusion of different things going on. And I also speak in the book as well. How was he influenced by what Genesis were doing at the time? Because if you listen to the Genesis album called Invisible Touch, there's an album song in it called Tonight, Tonight, Tonight. Yep. And if you listen to this track, it starts just the same as basically Pretty Little Head. You'd think they've almost copied each other. And, I mean, they must have heard it. There must be some influence between those two tracks. And then you find out that Hugh Padgham was simultaneously working on both albums at the same time. He was also interacting. I'm not sure if at the time he was working with Peter Gabriel at the same time. I know he was friends with Peter Gabriel for a time. He used Phil Collins to drum on some of the tracks on Press to Play. So there's got to be some relationship between the two, hasn't there? You know. So I just think it's a fascinating track. If you're looking for it to be one of Paul McCartney's classic songs, you're not going to hear it. But for all these different combinations of electronica and minimalism and tribalism, and also the video has got to be one of the best videos he's ever done.
It's everything. Well. There's so much in that song. That's why I love it. It's a melding of all these things into one thing. And then you take the video component on top of it as a visual medium.
The video's ahead of its time as well. If you notice it's in black and white, and there's one. Yes. Their suitcase is coloured. So don't they use that on Schindler's List? I've not watched Schindler's List for a while, but isn't there something on Schindler's List?
Yes. Well, I think she's wearing a red dress. The little girl.
Yeah. I mean. It predates Schindler's List in a way. And also there's the surrealist elements in the video. You notice when the parents are arguing, but there's rain coming through the house. If you did notice when they're arguing, they're both drenched in rain. I mean, so the videos are an amazing thing. And it only got to number 76 in the UK charts. So you've got all that time and money invested on an amazing video.
I know.
And nobody knows about it. It's just so sad, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, And the fact that too, I like the aspect of adding "She's Leaving Home," little snippet there for the video, which you don't hear on the album too. So it's,
you could have. I thought, to your point, I agree, Adrian. The album cut. I wish she put the single version on the album because the single version is so much better than the album.
I think so.
The bass guitar is what makes a difference. Bass guitar is some of his best bass guitar played since the Beatles, really, on that track.
Absolutely, yeah, 1,000% on that. Thank you for the breakdown.
No problem.
Cool. Yeah. So the song I picked is the song which I consider his best song of this new millennium. If you want, I think this is a great track. "Riding the Vanity Fair." It's my favorite song of the last 20 years that he's done. So Adrian.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that I characterize the song as being about contained anger. If you wanted to do a song which is superficially angry, he's even done a song called "Angry Ante," but it's more subtle to do something where you could just feel that the anger is breaking up through the surface a little bit. And the way he does this is by chords which are just slightly off key, which resolves. So it's almost like an ebb and flow of anger and him trying to deal with his anger. It just starts like, it's just an A minor add 9 chord. It's that F sharp. Like that, which is so, it's just, there's tension in the air right from the introduction.
Right.
And on the top of that, you've got a toy glockenspiel of all things played. Now, why would you have a toy glockenspiel on a track which is about anger or resentments? And the reason is because it's almost like it's too obvious. I think it wouldn't be subtle if he just did something punk and angry. He's done something more subtle. He's almost got this. I think the toy glockenspiel represents a naive faith, naive optimism that he's believing something as a child, like, oh, this person is good. But then when you're hearing the orchestral bits and all the slightly off-tune chords and harmony, but he feels let down. So I think that's the thing about the toy glockenspiel is quite an inspired choice of instrumentation to have on the top of it. Now, when the actual tune starts, it's very angular in form, the actual melody. So, and now to go from that, it's a leader for major 6. So it's going up like that. It's quite an angular. Even if you saw the melody going up and down, it goes high, bid, no, songs like that. You can almost draw a zigzag between the notes. You know what I mean? So it's that, and then it moves to E minor, and E minor, again, it's a 9 chord. Now that chord, this is a bit where it says, to tell you what I'm going to do. Now then it moves to C major 7. Now when you've got major 7th chords in music, they always sound more restful. Major 7th chords have a dreamy, restful sort of sound to them. And they're exploited a lot by, the composer, songwriter, Bacharach. He uses loads of major 7th chords in his songs a lot. Like. I don't know if you know the song, "This Guy's in Love with You" by Bacharach. You know it?
Bacharach, of course.
It's just full of major 7th chords. It's got this restful sort of sound to it. So we're going from E minor to the restful major 7 sounds, and that's what creates this idea of contained anger. It never really breaks through the surface. And the other thing to say about it as well, he uses his Epiphone casino guitar to play some great jazzy guitar licks in it as well. So it's a great solo bit. And a solo guitar bit isn't at all angry. He's not put loads of distortion on. That would be too obvious. It's very mellow sounding. It's somebody really reflecting on their anger. It's somebody trying to come to terms with their anger. So it's that whole contrast between the tension of somebody slightly off tune or angular added ninth chords and these more restful major seventh chords. We're trying to come to terms with his anger. So that's what it's all about for me. I think it's so clever because it's about this contained anger theme that runs throughout it. The music perfectly encapsulates that.
Yes.
And I think you said he did one version, completely scrapped it. I didn't even know you could hear any of it. You said on the electronic press kits of the album.
Yeah, the DVD.
You could hear a snippet.
Bit of it, right?
You could hear a snippet. I must admit, I need to find that. Actually, so I've lost my version of it.
I mean, it seemed like it was a little faster, if I remember correctly.
This was the one that him and Nigel Godrich butted heads.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Nigel didn't like this from the start, and then I'm glad that Paul did fight to get the song included on the album, because I think it's a very worthy song, and I think it with musically and lyrically, I think it's the combination, because there's times where the lyrics the lyrics are, I think, are crap, but the music is wonderful. I think this is one of the times where both the lyrics and the music really just stand out. Powerful song. He doesn't let us into his life that often, and here he is letting us into a little bit of his feelings, and I think he pulled it off wonderfully. But a song that that we talked about earlier, Why So Blue, you just did an interview recently where you talked about it briefly, and they closed that interview by playing that song, Why So Blue. I'm kind of surprised that you just discovered it yourself. I mean, obviously there's stuff that's I think even the hardcore fans will find something that they haven't heard before. But I mean, what were your thoughts when you first heard the song?
I thought it was one of his best songs he's done for a while, actually. I mean, the reason I've not heard it is because I'm probably somebody who's spent a lot of time also playing it from the sheet music as well, on learning things on a piano. I'm not somebody who's got this like massive collection of every CD or vinyl. I don't. All the vinyls and CDs are just boxed away somewhere. I just go on YouTube and listen to things at the moment because the sound quality is pretty much as good anyway. So I must admit I've not heard that one before. So it's an interesting song because it changes key and it's got some dramatic elements in it. But it's a song about contrast for me. It starts off like that, and it's a very unassuming way. Just a bit fiddly bits. And then the always good thing to have is when you change what's got a harmonic rhythm, the chords change one thing. What it's all about. When you change your chords faster, a lot of people stick to repetitive boring patterns in songs, but they just have one chord for one bar, one chord for another. What you notice with McCartney, he'll always change what we call a harmonic rhythm, so he'll throw some more chords in more quickly, so it speeds the song loud. It's all little twiddle on the D. Now, this is the fun bit because he goes to something completely unexpected. He goes to C minor. So you hear that? I mean, that's when. So all the interest there is what you have is after the chord of D. You expect to go back to G. It sounds logical. You just want to go back to G there because we're in the key of G. Want to go back to there, but instead he throws you totally off kilter. He goes to C minor. Now, for musicians who know, the key of G major's got one sharp, C minor's got three flats. So basically, it's like opening the window to a totally different territory and giving you something you do not expect to hear at all. So, and his face upon a descending. Then it goes to D major. So it's got all these chords in C minor going down based on the descending bass line, and then it goes to right to D major again. And I have made a point actually. It's called a Phrygian cadence. That sounds very posh, but when you've got something going from what's called the chord in a major key, when you've got the fourth chord which is made minor, and it goes to fifth chord, you've got this. it's almost like and it's a semitone shift. When he's shifting by a semitone or one fret, it sounds very dramatic. So it's creating all these dramatic effects in the music by doing that. So that's the really interesting thing. And all these semitonal shifts and obscure tonal centers, it reminds me of the James Bond song. I think this is going to be a good Bond theme, really. It's got all that sense of drama. But, you know, you're having Live and Let Die. Live and Let Die starts a similar way. It's in G major, and then it suddenly goes, it's got a build up, and it goes to the minor key, goes to G minor. And it's that contrast between the two sections, which is so interesting. And then there's a bit of light relief in the middle when he goes, sometimes when eyes meet, you know, we have to meet again, you know that bit. I mean, that's just basic chords again. It's nothing really, but that's the light relief between the sections. Now, when it goes to C minor, then the next verse starts at, it goes to B minor 7, so he shifts key by going down a fret by a semitone, and he starts the next verse in B minor. So he changes key there, so halfway through the song, we've actually gone to a different key center for the verse as well. So it's all these, and that's done again by a semitone shift, so there's a sense of drama there. So there's this sense of contrast and drama throughout the soul song. That's what keeps me interested in it, and that's why I think it's one of his best songs that I've heard. I'm surprised I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's a great song, and you know, I wish it was included on Memory Was Full. You know, it's for some reason he's got a habit of leaving some of the best songs off albums, anyways. So
notorious for that. But that was the first call, Adrian. Thank you for the break.
Cheers.
Yeah, so, you know, I think I asked you the first time you hear, but if they didn't listen the first time, I mean, how long does it take you to break down a song like this and then write about it for the book?
Normally about 2 or 3 days,
depending
on how complicated the song was. Something like You Gave Me the Answer, I probably came out about 8 pages on that because it's such a complicated song with different key changes, different instruments and things. Some songs are quite easy to do. There's some things which I do find hard. When something's in 3-part harmony, I'll often find a struggle I'll sit with my headphones and try and do that. And I've got somebody else in the room normally and they say, Dad, why are you singing really weird? Because I'm trying to work out Linda's harmony part or something. I'll be there with my headphones on, with one headphone. I'm trying to sing Linda's harmony part back. And they say, stop it, I'm trying to watch the TV, you know. So what I did, I aimed to write 2,000 words a night if I could. Unfortunately, the work I'm doing at the moment doesn't involve, because I work as a teacher. I think, Andy, you work as a teacher as well, don't you? You've probably got a lot more on your plate than I took a decision many years ago to mainly work as a substitute teacher. So when I don't want me anymore, I'll just get rid of me. But it's a bit more insecure, but it does mean that my evenings are mainly my own. I don't have like tons of marking to do because I work in special school settings as well, where some of the kids it's not the same onus to mark books and things. So I'll go home and I'll try and write 2,000 words a night if I could do. And that's how I managed to get it done. It does require a certain amount of discipline to do.
Absolutely.
It does. Any writer will tell you, you've got to help them out. I mean, you had the guys doing 8 Arms to Hold You the other day. I mean, that book's going to be out 3 times as long as mine. I can't imagine how long that took to work, to write, because it's such an enormous book as well, isn't it? Really, you know?
Right, it is.
I mean, mine was 170,000 words long. This last volume. I mean, that one they wrote must be getting over 500,000 words long. You know, really, it's crazy, isn't it? When you think about, imagine the English teacher said, right, you're going to write a 500,000 word essay. You know, you're used to something like, you know, when I was at school, like anyone, I hated doing essays, but as you get older, you do realise there's an art form in a way, because obviously an essay is an art form. So I did 2 essays at the end. I did one about Paul McCartney's musicianship and all the different things, musical characteristics. I did the author one about his influence generally, his cultural influence of Paul McCartney since 1970. That was me just being at school again, writing an essay, but it just happened to be a 10,000 word essay, so it was more like a dissertation, you know. So I enjoy doing it. So it's not like work in a traditional sense, you know.
No, it wasn't. And it read very easily. It was like reading an essay that you'd write for school. Those sections.
Yeah.
We talked about the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. You know,
Yeah.
broken them down. It was good. Yeah, those were very enjoyable because I have a very similar writing style. So those sections I identified with quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, style to me is such an important thing. I'd hate to write in a style which was too complicated, because actually I'm doing a part-time master's in Scottish history at the moment. I don't know, have you got an academic background? Did you go to Liverpool University, did you go to Liverpool University?
I went to Liverpool.
Right, okay, yeah. So, I mean, we both spent a lot of time. Sorry, the phone was ringing. I have to cut that out.
Okay.
We've both spent time. We've probably all spent time reading stuff we'd rather not read. We're almost forcing ourselves to help to read an article or something in a boring journal, and it's just the way it's written. You just sometimes reading, thinking, why can't you have written that in a slightly more approachable way? And I think academia's got a danger of being written. That's why. When I started to do this masters in history, I really don't think I'd go to academia full time, because I just don't like the writing style of it in some ways, you know. So I'm trying to write in a style which is approachable, but it's also not so glib or too simplistic, you know. Just finding that balance, which is so important to me, you know.
So lots of research about the Jacobite Rebellion, I'm sure.
Yes, all of that stuff. Yeah, but Highland clearances I did quite a lot about, so just a part-time thing I've done, because I just thought that if I'm writing these books, Paul McCartney books, and I've almost finished the history masters as well, it just helps if you keeping your research skills a bit at home, because let's be honest, there are a lot of Beatles books which are slightly iffy in terms of research, presentation, writing style. I mean, there are. I mean, it's not. And on the other hand, there are a few academic Beatles books, which I won't mention any names. Some which I think I wish you'd have written a little bit more in a more an approachable way, rather than reading like a physics essay, you know. So it's trying to strike the balance, but I do think there needs to be rigor, even if you write it to the general audience. I'd hate it to be sloppy, you know.
Yeah, and there needs to be an amount of rigor. In my MA program at Liverpool Hope, this was the very, you know, that was it. You know, how do we apply some academic rigor to popular music studies?
Yeah.
And that's the fine line. A lot of that was down to audience responses and what pulls an audience together into genres. Why is popular music? So it was a fascinating program. People think, master's degree in the Beatles, it was just, you know, you sat there and studied She Loves You. No, that wasn't the case at all. It was an approach in studying, you know, genres and audience responses, and really the history of England in post-war Britain, and in the environment in which the Beatles could emerge and become who they were, you know, culturally. So that was what it was all about. So it's nice to see that you're kind of studying a similar, you know, path there with the Scottish stuff.
Yeah, and I've also got a background in, when I did the undergraduate degree, I did popular culture and popular culture approaches to understanding popular culture, popular culture studies of the cinema, and also all different approaches to popular culture. So I've probably read quite a few of the same books that you have. So I've got a long-standing interest in popular culture anyway, but looked at it from an academic viewpoint, you know, and the history of it in general.
Cool.
That's cool.
Excellent. Do you think there's too much McCartney out there? Is there too much McCartney music?
No, too much Beatles music. I just think it's the emphasis and all that. And I think also he's forgotten about his own solo career as well.
Right.
I just think he spends too much time going on glitzy, mainstream American TV things like is it Jimmy Fallon or people like that?
Yeah.
I just get he comes out with the same stories like, I sang She Loves You, yeah. My dad said, couldn't you have made it yes. How many times have you said that story? I mean, nobody ever has ever asked him why did Jeff Britton not last so long in Wings, or what was it like writing on a boat when you were doing London Town? I mean, so if we could I just think we need to take the obsession of the Beatles a little bit, and take the breaks of that, and just look at some of his solo career a bit more, because I just think it's totally disproportionate, you know.
Right. Well, we know how One Night was on the making of London Town, because we got Wanderlust from it.
Right.
Oh
But,
yeah.
But I think that's why, as we as fans, when we get these archive sets, we're so ravenous to read them, because to see what his current contemporary view on this music that he kind of so has neglected,
Right.
and it's forcing his hand now to revisit moments that he's really not too comfortable with doing when he's in his public persona, when he's Beatle Paul. So that's why we like to look at these sets.
Yeah, it is kind of fascinating, because especially when you look at the McCartney 2 archive set, where it kind of mirrors something what Linda said, where in throughout the 80s, where he just felt like the members of Wings just weren't up to par, with someone like a McCartney as a musician and songwriter, and felt like they just
who is?
weren't well rehearsed. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why starting in the 80s, you start to see him working with better musicians, I guess, then, or more well-known, or in studio, well-known studio musicians.
I thought that was that comment from Linda. I just always felt was a little unfair, because all the members of Wings have been greatly talented, and especially with the release of that archival set from 2 years ago, I think it's shown that the early incarnation of Wings was a pretty damn good outfit as well. With Henry and Henry McCulloch and Denny Seiwell.
Denny Seiwell, yeah. Right. What about a little bit after the book came out, you created a website?
Yeah.
For your writings as well.
So the website really was to help promote the book, and also because it's a hobby of mine to just talk about some things. And I also thought that the limitation of books and also of just going on Facebook pages is that you can't actually direct people to the exact thing you're talking about. I use time codes. I'll say, 120, listen to this effect. But the amazing thing with YouTube is you can actually do the start at thing where you can say start the video at 120, and so you can start the video at the exact point you want people to listen to. So I just think it's more accessible, and I'll try. And I have actually, with this master's thing of me doing history, part of that now is doing the occasional blog post, because they actually think blogs are an important part of academic study. And I think the whole idea of a blog is to give a slight taster to a non-academic audience of some of the general points you want to talk about. So that's what it was aimed at, to give people who maybe don't know about some of the music theory things, just some little teasers of what the book was about, some ideas about what was in the book, and also give them concrete examples from the music at the actual starting point, so you can start to hear for yourself these bits. So basically got all the videos to the right place for you to listen to these effects, really. And it's just to help people take an interest in some of the things I've done, because I've also done some songs which aren't in the book. Was listening to the theme from the Family Way the other week, and analysed that, and I did It's For You, which is a song you wrote for Cilla Black. So there's a few things which I've done which are in the book as well, which I think are interesting, and some thematic things I've linked to the Beatles as well.
Right. Yeah, I thought the Hottest Sun, the evolution of an early, McCartney. I thought that was pretty good. You got obviously got your other interviews and reviews on here as well. So, and then like you said, this is also one way they can purchase your book.
Yeah, it is. Another good one, which I quite enjoy doing, is the evolution of a guitar solo from My Love. I did it from that first rehearsal we did in London, which was filmed, which is basically just somebody just finding a way through the notes. And you've got some of the solo versions on tour in Europe, which Henry McCulloch plays. And you've got the final version of My Love, which is just amazing solo that was recorded, maybe the best of 20 takes, recorded in Abbey Road. So you can actually hear how this solo begins to develop a bit. And the first versions of it, you wouldn't even call it solo. It's just like somebody just finding the notes on the fretboard, really, But it's just stuff like that you can't do in a book. So I think if you're using a multimedia thing of a website where you can embed videos, it's a lot more immediate. You can actually show examples. So that's what the amazing thing about a website with YouTube embedded videos is for me, anyway.
All right, here's one for both of you guys, or all three of us. Best solo McCartney song. Maybe I'm Amazed by Paul, My Love by Henry, or Gilmore's solo for No More Lonely Nights.
Oh, best guitar solo.
Yeah, best guitar solo.
My Love,
No More Lonely Nights, or Maybe I'm Amazed.
I would go with My Love because although it's less complicated than Gilmore's,
Okay.
I think it's more beautifully stated, and I like the song. I mean, I do like all three songs. So that's would be my choice.
I'll go with the live version of Maybe I'm Amazed with Jimmy McCullough.
Oh,
Not the
interesting.
studio.
At the studio. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think I tend to favor the My Love solo a little bit more. However, I do love the Gilmore solo on No More Lonely Nights. I think that's done very well. Also.
Can't go wrong either way. They're all great.
Yeah. Cool. So, Adrian, thank you once again for coming up and talking with us about Volume 2 of Paul McCartney After the Beatles, musical appreciation. Once again, you can find this on his website, paulmccartneyafterthebeatles.com. You can check that out there. And anything else you want to close with? Anything else you want to plug with?
Lulu.com. It's also available on that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you just go to the website, paulmccartneyafterthebeatles.com, you'll find it all on there and all the links to the shop as well. So if you want to get it from there, all the different versions of the book there, because the hardback is not on Amazon yet anyway. But
so there's a hardcover copy.
Yeah, if you want the hardback, I mean it's basically the same book, just some people like it in that format. So that's on my website as well. So it's paulmccartneyafterthebeatles.com.
Great. Is there hardback for the Volume 1 as well?
Yeah, both got hardbacks. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Or softback. Oh, PDF. There's a PDF. If people want to pay for the PDF, it's a lot cheaper as well. I know I've given you guys a free copy.
Yep.
But
Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Yeah, if people want a PDF, it's only about $10 or something like that.
Oh, cool. All right. Andy, were you going to say something?
I just said congrats on Volume 2 and putting together another masterful work and analysis of music that really has been largely ignored and bringing attention and some light to some great
Absolutely
in such a professional way. So thank you.
Thank you for saying it's much appreciated. Thank you.
Right. Anything else you got coming up, or any other interviews you want to plug, or is there
Not yet. I just think you guys are the last one I've got. But if there's anybody else who does Paul McCartney podcast or anything, I'd be willing to talk to your podcast or the other podcasters watching out there.
Awesome. Great. Well, once again, thank you very much. Andy, thank you again for your work. As always, it's great being here with you. So everybody out there, check out Paul McCartney After the Beatles, a musical appreciation Volume 2. And don't forget about Volume 1 if you don't have either. Yeah, get them both, or tell somebody you want it for a gift or something. Just, check it out, especially if you're a musician or if you're a beginning musician and you're a Paul McCartney fan, you want to learn more about Paul McCartney as a musician. So check it out. It's all there for you. We are, as always, Two Legs. We're happy that you're here with us. Thank you for joining us. We've gotten a lot of new feedback, a lot of new listeners. So we appreciate you guys joining us. Hopefully you'll check out a lot of the past episodes as well, like a lot of you have. Be sure to check out Adrian's first interview he did with us too, and I think that was December last year, maybe, or something like that. I think maybe October. But either way, he's there, and you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Two Legs Podcast. Check out our YouTube channel, Two Legs of Paul McCartney Podcast. That's where you're obviously going to see our wonderful faces and all of our, smiling and laughing and all that stuff. We're also on Podbean, iTunes, iHeartRadio, so you can check us out there. Email us at twolegspodcast@gmail.com. Once again, we really appreciate everybody out there taking the time to listen to us. So thank you once again. So as always, everybody out there, have a great day and a beautiful night. So take care.
Listening to Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, hosted by Tom Hunyadi and Andy Nichols, with musical contributions by Dylan C.